Hey everybody, and welcome back to another compilation style video. Today's concept is going to be every time an announcer crashed out or said something completely out of pocket for the 2025 season. Now, as this is previously recorded content, obviously some of it might sound a little out of date when you take into account that the season is already over, but I don't think it actually affects the calls, in this case, very much at all. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoy, and have a great rest of your day. Yesterday had to be one of the most exciting baseball days of the year, as we witnessed 5 walk-offs, 3 extra inning games, and 3 contests with over 20 total runs scored. I'm going to have to make a number of videos today to try to recap the high points, but we're going to start first with the loss that was probably the most tragic for its respective fan base, being the Yankees, who had to witness every one of the players they acquired at the deadline this year negatively impact a game versus the Marlins, which also resulted in some of the most frustrated commentary you'll ever hear from an MLB booth. But before we get to this agonizing point, let's first go through the entire contest, which would first see the Yankees get out to a 3-0 lead in a surprisingly scoreless game in the 4th, when Giancarlo Stanton crushed a patented line drive laser versus his former squad. That ball left his bat at 116 miles an hour. Big guy still got it. The Yankees would manage to add on to this lead in the 5th with 2-out singles from Jason Dominguez and Cody Bellinger, pushing their lead all the way to 6-0. But the fish would start chipping away in the bottom of that inning, when Javier Sanoja, who came into this game with a .631 OPS, crushed an opposite field home run, dropping the lead to 4. Later on in the frame, they would get a couple more when Liam Hicks flipped a single into center field with 2 outs. Suddenly, we had a ball game again. But the Yankees weren't done adding on, extending their lead back into semi-comfortable territory when Trent Grisham crushed a 3-run home run of his own down the right field line. This meant that when the new-look Yankee bullpen first took the mound with Representative Jake Bird, they had a 5-run lead to play with. But things would not begin well at all for the former Rocky, who would allow the bases to get loaded with just 1 out, before grooving a first-pitch sinker to Kyle Stowers, an offering right down the middle of the plate that got slapped out to left field, just past the reach of a leaping Dominguez. After getting just 1 more out, Bird would be done, bringing another acquisition, David Bednar, to the mound, with his first pitch for his new team atomized by Sanoja, giving Javier more home runs on this day than he had coming into the contest on the season, tying things up at 9. But remember, there still was only 2 outs, a fact that would haunt David following, as he proceeded to give up a double to the gap, then a little tapper up the middle that couldn't be fielded by Anthony Volpe. This meant that when Agustin Ramirez lined a single into left field, the Fish had somehow managed to erase multiple huge deficits versus what was supposed to be a stellar bullpen, en route to taking the lead late. But they're not a team themselves known for locking down the back end of games, and would further prove this by giving up a home run to Anthony Volpe just 5 pitches into the top of the 8th, setting things back to even and getting some momentum back for the Bronx Bombers. This takes us to the top of the 9th, when, with 2 outs, pinch runner Jose Caballero got one of the biggest jumps you'll ever see on a major league field en route to stealing his first base with his new club. Another recent acquisition, Ryan McMahon, would then ground a single into center field, putting New York back on top. Anthony Volpe would go on to add to his big day at the plate, which saw him record 4 hits, that home run, and a stolen base by slapping a fly ball just out of the reach of the center fielder, driving in an important insurance run. This is where things stood going into the bottom of the 9th, with another deadline pickup, Camilo Doval, set to make his first appearance, which would start shaky as well, with him putting 2 guys on with just 1 out. That meant that when Xavier Edwards grounded a single into right field, the Yankees' lead would be cut to just a single run. Or would it? Because you see, Caballero, who hasn't spent a ton of time in the outfield in his career, allowed this ball to get past him and roll nearly all the way to the warning track, again tying things up. This did not sit very well with former All-Star Paul O'Neill, who had this to say immediately following.
Michael, you get to a point where you just can't make this up. I mean, the ball gets by, the base hits, the runners are running, it's like a Little League game going on out here.
Yeah, you don't hear that kind of frustrated candor from the booth very often, but I do think in this case it was justified. And there would indeed be one final indecency they would have to suffer, with Ramirez poking a little ground ball just out in front of the plate, but in the perfect spot to allow base runner Edwards to slide in safely. It would be after the contest officially concluded that we would actually hear Kay chime in this time without much of a filter.
All 3 relievers that were so touted that the Yankees acquired, they all did not do their job tonight. And we keep digging new holes, Paul, and this one goes under the worst loss of the year.
And I have to agree, scoring 12 runs for an offense without its best player, being Aaron Judge, only to lose courtesy of horrible pitching that you had to pay a pretty penny for, and some terrible defense that couldn't have been worse timed, has to sting like little else in baseball can. I may not be a Yankee fan myself, but I can certainly empathize with them after that abomination. Even after a deadline where they sold a few of their most valuable pieces, the Giants remain on the outskirts of the postseason picture, hanging around 500. That is, at least until the last week or so, when they've proceeded to lose 5 games in a row, go into the negative territory when it comes to run differential, and drop to 5.5 back of the last wildcard spot. And their most recent contest was perhaps one of their ugliest in a while, and it was during this game that they registered a play so embarrassing that their radio team directly called it ugly, as well as adding that the whole team was just unraveling. Striking words, but before we get there, let's examine the events leading up to this. Things would begin well for San Francisco as they managed to face the minimum in the first, courtesy in large part of a double play, then see the second start with the tumbling catch from Heliot Ramos. But this momentum would soon be torched when San Diego managed to load the bases, before seeing what 100% would have been an inning-ending double play ball bounce off the bag at second and ricochet over the head of Willy Adames, scoring 2 runs in the process. That's just straight bad luck. The Padres would reload the bases for Fernando Tatis Jr. just a couple batters later, with the righty punching the ball into center field to score a couple more. After a sac fly, the score was 5-0, already creating a hole that San Francisco's struggling offense was going to have a hard time climbing out of. But the frame wasn't over, as it was Manny Machado's turn to hit, and the veteran would come through with a fly ball down the left field line on a hanging slider. It was then that we would see Heliot barehand the ball off the wall before firing it directly into the dirt, allowing it to trickle back towards the infield, scoring Tatis on a play he wouldn't have even tried it on. It was this moment that was so frustrating it prompted the reaction I detailed in the intro.
Tatis scores at 6-0 Padres, and the Giants, it's just unraveling. Man. Ugly.
You just don't hear that kind of honesty very often, especially in relation to your own team. But honestly, I don't think you can blame them here. That was easily one of the ugliest plays of 2025 overall, and I'm sure part of the frustration came from the fact that it was Ramos that did it, as he's consistently been one of the worst overall defenders in baseball this season with a -10 fielding run value. The Padres would go on to add another run later on in that same inning on a wild pitch, giving San Diego 7 runs in just that single frame. And from here, it never really felt competitive again, eventually winning by a final score of 11-1, which pushed them to 1 game in front of the Dodgers in the West as they looked to win their first division title since 2006. And for the Giants, they're now staring down the barrel of a 4th straight season without making the playoffs, after a prior decade in which they won 3 World Series. I've made a couple videos in the last few weeks talking about announcers calling out their players, as both the Yankees,
Michael, you get to a point where you just can't make this up. I mean, the ball gets by. I mean, the base hits. The runners are running. It's like a little league game going on out here.
And we keep digging new holes, Paul, and this one goes under the worst loss of the year.
and the Giants.
Tatis scores at 6-0 Padres, and the Giants, it's just unraveling. Man. Ugly.
Both had plays that influenced their respective game callers to take them to task, but I think you'd have to stop short of calling this outright anger. In fact, that's why I titled the videos in such a way as to assert that they were disgusted, not furious. But we just heard a call yesterday that more so fits this description, as an announcer got as animated as you'll ever hear in a negative capacity towards his own player. The Marlins were facing off against the St. Louis Cardinals, coming off a rough stretch of games that had taken them from around the 500 mark to solidly below it. So you already know there's probably a little bit of frustration with that fact in and of itself. But at least they would get off to the better start, scoring a run in the bottom of the second when Javier Sanoja grounded into a bases-loaded double play. Starting pitcher Sandy Alcantara would then work out of a run-scoring jam in the third when Xavier Edwards made this nice play up the middle. Miami was right back at it in the bottom of that frame, scoring 2 more on a single from Heriberto Hernandez, giving them a decent cushion. And Sandy would go back to work, punching out Wilson Contreras and Nolan Gorman on what we'll call a generous strike 3 called in the fourth. This takes us to the moment I described in the intro, when, with 1 out in the fifth, Sandy induced a swing and a miss on an 0-2 fastball that somehow got past catcher Agustin Ramirez, allowing the runner to reach first base. This prompted Tommy Hutton, a guy who's been in their booth for 27 years now, to say this.
It makes Sandy throw more pitches. See, to me, don't try to frame that pitch. Catch it before you try to frame it. You see it so much at this level, and I think it's overdone, overcooked.
Now, I know a lot of people that are into the new age of analytics are going to roll their eyes and think that he's perhaps being melodramatic, but I personally would disagree when we see the context of who he's calling out here. If you look at the numbers, this dude has been the worst catcher in all of Major League Baseball this year by blocks above average, by, get ready for it, -20, a full 9 worse than the next closest player at -11. And while ironically his framing is the best part of his game at only a marginally below average mark of -2, you do indeed have to catch the ball before you can frame it, which I think was the gist of what Hutton was getting at. And in case you're wondering if there's anything Ramirez is good at, he's also been at the absolute bottom of Major League Baseball in catchers caught stealings above average, at -7, tied with Kyle Higashioka. No matter how you slice it, this guy's been the worst defensive catcher in the league, and I can totally understand that being immensely frustrating if you're having to watch it every day. And I'm sure, like he feared, this would come back to bite the Marlins shortly after, when Jordan Walker followed with a base hit to left field, then with 2 outs after the inning already would have been over. Lars Nootbaar would crush an 0-2 changeup on a hop over the wall, registering St. Louis's first run of the night. Thankfully for Miami, this wouldn't end up mattering much, because they would tack on a tally of their own in the bottom of the 5th, then another in the 6th, when Maximo Acosta registered his first Major League hit on his first Major League home run. Sandy would then go on to complete 7 excellent innings and one of his best overall starts of the year, bringing with him a season-high 9 strikeouts. And that was that. The Fish would win this one by a final of 6-2, following a bases-loaded walk in the 8th and a 1-2-3 ninth, as they continue on their journey to finish 2025 strong with what has become an admittedly intriguing young core. The Mets have been arguably the most frustrating team for their respective fan base this year in my opinion. From being one of the best teams in baseball through the season's first half to one of the worst in the second, to go along with downright horrible performance for most of their big trade acquisitions. And they arguably just hit the lowest point of their season yesterday when they fell out of position for a wild card again. And their broadcast crew let them hear about it with an honesty that was both refreshing and downright brutal. Facing the Marlins in basically a must-win game, they would get out to a fast start versus Sandy Alcantara, with Francisco Lindor crushing a home run on the second pitch of the ball game before Juan Soto followed with a single and stolen base. A batter later, it was Pete Alonso's turn to come through, grounding an 0-2 changeup down the left field line. Pete would be stranded at second, but they had 2 guys on in the top of the second, a prime opportunity to add on. However, they wouldn't be able to do so when Lindor crushed a line drive to first base, with Luis Torrens getting doubled off in the process. Shortly after, Brett Beatty, their third baseman, would be removed with right side soreness. They were back to threatening again in the third when Soto led off with a single, then again stole second base, putting him just 2 swipes away from a 40-40 season. But the Mets again would strand another runner in scoring position, even after moving him up to third with 1 out, as Alonso and McNeil struck out back-to-back to end the frame. Rookie Brandon Sproat, meanwhile, had been dealing on the mound through the game's first 4 frames, not allowing much in the way of traffic and nothing in the way of runs. The 5th wouldn't be so kind to him though, as he proceeded to give up 3 straight hits to lead off the frame, tying the game and pushing the go-ahead run to third. The righty would then bounce back to get a ground ball to first, hit too hard to push anything across. This was where the shenanigans began, as Jacob Marcy followed with basically the exact same ground ball to first base, only this time Alonso would see it go off his mitt, and even though Jeff McNeil helped him recover in time to get the out, the Marlins now had the lead. After Agustin Ramirez flipped a flare into left field, Sproat's day was done, bringing on lefty trade acquisition Gregory Soto. And from here, all hell broke loose. First, Ramirez would take second by getting one of the biggest leads you'll ever see, then do the same with third. Soto made 0 throws in response, though on the second one it really wasn't his fault, as Ronnie Mauricio, their new player at the hot corner, wasn't even covering the bag. That meant that when Xavier Edwards grounded a single into center field, he easily scored on a play that normally would have just pushed him to third at the most. That deflated everybody in Metland, including the broadcast crew, who had this to say following the implosion.
I mean, you might take your whole travel ball squad off the field if something like that happened. Here's a team that is fighting to get to October. What are you going to do in October with an inning like that?
Just brutal as hell, but in my opinion, completely justified. Connor Norby would then add insult to injury by crushing an inner half sinker way out to left field, a no-doubter that pushed things even further out of reach. Their offense would have one final big chance in this one, when with 2 outs in the 8th and the bases loaded, Mark Vientos would pop out to shortstop Otto Lopez, induced by the outright maniac Tyler Phillips, arguably MLB's most locked-in player. They would then proceed to go down 1-2-3 in the 9th, again dropping them out of their wildcard spot thanks to a win by Cincinnati and Milwaukee. And yes, there still are a couple games to play, but right now, things are looking pretty bleak in Queens. We, as baseball fans, just witnessed one of the greatest pitching performances in MLB history for 2 teams simultaneously, as for nearly 15 full innings, the Tigers and Mariners would see time and time again their staffs bend but not break, trading high-wire act escapes like punches in a boxing match. But, alas, someone had to come away with the victory, and it would indeed end up being Seattle, walking off Detroit over 5 hours after first pitch. This was, of course, a draining experience for those on the opposing side, one so much so that their radio broadcast actually ended up swearing on a hot mic immediately after.
You get tired.
Fuck this game recap.
Perhaps a fitting end to what was an incredibly frustrating game to lose. Despite the final score, things would begin pretty well offensively for the Mariners, as in the bottom of the second, Josh Naylor would line a double down the left field line on a check swing. Certainly an impressive feat considering it was on a triple-digit fastball out of the zone, before then almost immediately stealing third base, in a fashion he's done pretty much the entire season. He might be one of the slowest players in baseball, but he's turned himself into one of the best pure base stealers. And this extra 90 feet would prove crucial, as Mitch Garver would then drive a fly ball to center field soon after, staking Seattle to a 1-0 cushion. And from here, nothing, and I really can't emphasize how much nothing, would happen until the top of the sixth, with the only real notable thing occurring offensively being in a negative capacity for the Mariners, who struck out 7 times in a row versus Tigers ace lefty Tarek Skubal, which actually broke a playoff record set earlier this very postseason by Trey Savage. Top of the sixth, Javier Baez would lead off with a first pitch double to center field. A hustling play punctuated by an excellent slide around a tag. This chased George Kirby from the game, bringing lefty Gabe Spear in to face Kerry Carpenter, the only Tiger with a hit to this point besides Baez. And he would deliver, crushing a center-cut fastball 411 feet to center field, giving his team the lead with one swing of the bat. Scoob would then hop right back on the mound and punch out 2 more, ending his night with 13 strikeouts in 6 innings of one-run baseball, making him the only pitcher in Major League history with multiple 13 strikeout games in one postseason. And man, you could tell Seattle was happy that he was out, as they would score their very next time at bat in the bottom of the 7th, with birthday boy Leo Rivas, he of just 39 regular season hits in his career, knocking an RBI single with 2 outs. And from here, for the next 3 innings, nothing much would come to pass in terms of threats, with only 2 guys reaching one time in the 8th, which the Tigers couldn't do anything with. This takes us to the bottom of the 10th, when rookie Troy Melton pulled off the first high-wire act of the night, giving up a leadoff double to Victor Robles down the right field line on his very first pitch. But, like I said, the motif of extra innings was bend but don't break. A pop-out, strikeout, and ground-out, with a Cal Raleigh intentional walk mixed in there, resulted in Seattle coming away empty-handed. And for a moment, it looked like the Tigers might be able to take this momentum and do something with it, as Kerry Carpenter, who had just a monster game in this one, grounded a leadoff single into center field before going to second on the first passed ball by catcher Raleigh all season. But, just like the M's, nothing would end up coming of this after a line-out, fly-out, and strikeout. The Tigers would do the exact same thing in the 12th, this time with 2 guys on and nobody out, as after a Parker Meadows bunt moved both runners up, it was Javier Baez's turn to ground into a fielder's choice, then Gleyber Torres's to fly to shallow right. And while certainly the offense was embarrassing throughout, I'm seeing a ton of people want to clown on the Tigers right now for their performance in this one, but you absolutely cannot deny that they certainly had some clutch pitching as well, as Cater Montero, in his second inning of work, got into a 2 guys on, no-out jam himself and managed to get out of it with a double play. And Jack Flaherty, a starter on in relief because they'd gotten so deep into the ballgame, did the same thing in the next inning, after walking his first 2 batters. Detroit's last real opportunity in this one would come in the 14th, when Dylan Dingler doubled on the left field line, before being stranded via strikeout and pop-out. Tigers backstop would then add to his highlight reel with a ridiculously good throw in the bottom of that inning, a missile to second base to nab Victor Robles attempting to steal. 14 innings in, that's just a ridiculous play. This takes us to our final frame, the 15th, when, after the Tigers' top of the order went down with a whimper, Seattle stormed out yet again, getting 2 runners on with nobody out after a single and hit by pitch. A lineout from Raleigh would push both runners up after a throwing error by Parker Meadows, influencing A.J. Hinch to walk Julio Rodriguez. This set the stage perfectly for Game 2 hero, Jorge Polanco, to come through with a walk-off single. A missile shot through the right side at 110 miles an hour, sending Seattle to their first ALCS since 2001. This brings us to the moment I referenced in the intro, as not too long after the game officially ended, Dan Dickerson, the Tigers' longtime radio play-by-play guy, was caught on a hot mic saying this.
Dan and I will be back to talk about it after this on the Detroit Tigers radio network.
And fragile.
I don't have to do a game. Oh,
He's fuck. You get tired.
Fuck this game recap. Oh,
And
I'm sorry.
sometimes
Was that out
you get
loud?
sick.
3, 2, 1.
I think this perfectly captured the mood of every Tigers fan watching from around the country. A long, fruitless game that ended in pretty much the most heartbreaking way possible. And believe me, as somebody who personally has gotten back into the Detroit fandom over the last couple months, as I originally hail from Michigan, I felt this deeply, especially because I, lucky enough, actually was there. Regardless, congratulations to the Mariners, who absolutely earned their shot at playing for the chance to go to their first World Series in franchise history, and potentially win the whole damn thing.
Alright everybody, if you made it this far, I appreciate you watching, and if you did, consider checking out any of these other videos on your screen right now for other content just like this. Also, if you ever see anything you'd like to see me detail in the video, feel free to reach out to my email, basebpoet@gmail.com, and if I end up using your idea, I'll give you a shout out. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.